My wedding was hijacked by a guest who demanded her daughter replace me as bride. I thought the worst part of my wedding day would be the nerves. I was wrong. It started with a woman I had never seen before walking into the venue like she owned it. She didn't check in with anyone. She didn't smile. She just looked straight at me like I was standing in the wrong place. At first, I assumed she was lost. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "That dress is meant for my daughter, not you." I laughed at first. I actually thought it was a joke, but she didn't laugh back. She just kept staring at me like the ceremony was already ruined and I just hadn't realized it yet. My name is Claire. I was 28 when I got married. It was supposed to be a small wedding at a coastal venue, nothing extravagant. Just close family, a few friends, and people my fiancé Evan trusted, or so I thought. Because that woman didn't look like she belonged to either side. And yet no one stopped her from walking deeper into the venue. No one even asked her name. Not yet. I remember glancing at Evan, expecting him to recognize her. He didn't. He looked just as confused as I felt, but the woman didn't care. She turned slightly and waved someone in from outside, a girl, maybe early 20s, blonde hair, pale face, eyes locked on the ground like she didn't want to be there. "This is Lily," the woman said. "She's the one you're supposed to marry today." I froze. For a second, I genuinely thought I had misheard her. Then I felt the entire room shift. Conversations stopped. Chairs scraped. Someone's glass hit the floor. Evan stepped forward and said, "You need to leave." But the woman just smiled like he had confirmed something for her. "No," she said softly. "You're just confused. You always get confused at first." That was the first moment I felt something deeper than embarrassment. It was recognition, like she wasn't just disrupting a wedding. She believed she was correcting one. Someone finally approached her from the guest side. My aunt. She asked her who she was. The woman answered without hesitation. "I'm the one who made sure this wedding was always going to happen." That was the moment security should have stepped in, but there was no security yet. We had hired minimal staff, just coordinators, and somehow she already looked like she belonged more than I did. She walked closer to me. Slowly, like she was inspecting something she had paid for. "You were never supposed to be the bride," she said. "You're just standing in a place that belongs to my daughter." Lily didn't speak. She just stood behind her mother, shaking slightly. I looked at her, trying to find anger or confidence or anything that explained this. But she looked scared, not entitled, not excited, just scared. That was the first crack in the story that didn't make sense. Because if this was some delusional mother pushing her daughter into a fantasy, the daughter wouldn't look like that. Evan stepped in front of me then, and I remember him saying something I'll never forget. "I don't know who you are, but this wedding is not connected to you in any way." The woman tilted her head. "That's what you think," she said, and then she pulled out an envelope from her bag. Old, slightly worn, like it had been handled too many times. She didn't hand it to me. She handed it to the wedding coordinator instead. "Read it," she said. The coordinator hesitated, then opened it. I still remember how her face changed halfway through the first page. Confusion first, then discomfort, then something like fear. She looked up at me and said quietly, "Claire, this has your name on it." My heart dropped. Evan moved closer. "What is it?" The coordinator didn't answer right away. She just kept reading. And then she said, "It's a letter of intent for a marriage arrangement, dated 12 years ago." The room went silent again. 12 years ago, I was 16, and I had no idea what she was talking about. The woman stepped forward again like she was enjoying the silence. "My daughter was promised this life," she said, "a long time ago, before you even understood what it meant." That's when I started shaking, not from fear exactly, from confusion, because nothing about this matched reality. Evan grabbed the envelope and read it himself. I watched his expression change piece by piece, first disbelief, then anger, then something I didn't recognize, uncertainty. He looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't belong in our lives. "That's not real," he said finally, but his voice didn't sound sure. That's when one of the older guests stood up. An elderly woman I didn't recognize. She had been sitting quietly in the back the entire time. She looked at the woman in the aisle and said one word. "Margaret." The entitled woman froze, just for half a second, but it was enough, because in that half second I saw something break in her expression, like a mask slipping. The elderly guest walked forward slowly. "I knew you'd resurface eventually," she said. The woman, Margaret, smiled tightly. "I was never gone," she replied, and that's when the elderly guest turned to the rest of us and said something that changed everything. This woman was banned from weddings years ago. She used to insert herself into ceremonies and claim brides were replaced. "She's done this before." A murmur spread through the crowd. Evan looked at me immediately. I could see it in his face. He didn't know what was true anymore, and that hurt more than anything she had said. Margaret didn't deny it, she just nodded slightly. Yes, she said, because they were all wrong weddings too. She pointed at Lily. My daughter has been prepared for this life for years. Lily flinched at the word prepared. Not proud, not confident, flinched. That was the second crack. Because if this was a long-planned arrangement, why did Lily look like she wanted to disappear? The elderly guest stepped closer again. I remember you, she said. You worked as a caretaker at my cousin's wedding property. You tried to take a child that day. The air shifted. That was not just strange anymore, that was dangerous. Margaret's expression sharpened. That was a misunderstanding, she said quickly, but the elderly guest shook her head. No, she said. You were removed. There was a report. You were told never to be near wedding events again. That was when the coordinator suddenly whispered something to a staff member. I caught only fragments. Flagged name, previous incident, no clearance. My stomach dropped again. She had been vetted and still got in. Evan stepped forward again. Why are you here? He asked more firmly this time. Margaret looked at him like he was the one being difficult. To complete what was interrupted, she said. Then she looked at me again, and to fix the mistake that put her here instead of my daughter. That was when I finally snapped. What mistake? I asked. My voice came out sharper than I expected. She smiled slightly. Your mother knew, she said. That stopped everything inside me, because my mother had passed away when I was 19, and I had never told this woman that. No one had, not even Evan knew the full details. The fact that she said it so casually made my skin go cold. Evan turned to me immediately. Claire, what is she talking about? I didn't have an answer because I didn't know. The elderly guest stepped in again. This is exactly how she operates, she said. She attaches herself to grief, to families in transition, weddings, funerals, anything emotional. Margaret interrupted. I only correct what was stolen. And then she turned to Lily. Tell them, she said softly. Tell them what you were promised. Lily's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Instead, she shook her head, barely noticeable, but enough. That was the third crack, because if she believed this story, she would have spoken by now. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Evan grabbed my hand. We're stopping this, he said, but before anyone could move, the elderly guest said something that froze the entire room again. I know who the daughter is, she said. Everyone turned to her, even Margaret. The elderly woman pointed at Lily. She's not your daughter. Silence, complete silence. Then she continued. She's a missing girl. From a case 10 years ago, different family, different name, I remember the photo. The room exploded. Guests started speaking at once. Someone called for police. Someone else tried to pull Lily away. But Margaret moved faster than I expected. She grabbed Lily's wrist. Not gently, not motherly, like she was afraid to lose possession. She is mine, she said firmly. And that was the moment everything shifted from strange to terrifying. Because Lily didn't resist her. She just looked down, like she had accepted something she didn't understand. Evan pulled me back. This is insane, he said, but I could see it now, not just insanity, history. Something had been building long before I ever got engaged. The coordinator finally whispered to me that police had been called. Margaret heard it and smiled. That won't matter, she said. Then she leaned closer to me. You think this is your wedding, she whispered, but it was always a replacement. My blood went cold. Replacement for what? For who? Before I could ask, the elderly guest stepped forward one last time. And this is where everything finally broke open. She looked at Margaret and said, You weren't removed because of confusion. You were removed because you tried to replace a bride once before, and the groom's family reported you when the real bride went missing for 2 days. That sentence landed like a hammer. Margaret's expression changed instantly. Not denial, not anger. Recognition, like she had been remembered. Evan turned slowly to me, and I saw something in his eyes I will never forget. Fear that this wasn't random. Fear that somehow this had been orbiting my life longer than I knew. Margaret spoke again, quieter this time. They always overreacted, she said, but her voice wasn't stable anymore. It was slipping. Lily finally spoke then, barely audible. Mom, please. That was the first time she called her mom with fear instead of obedience, and it broke something in Margaret. For the first time, she looked unsure, not of her story, but of control. That's when police finally arrived. But Margaret didn't run. She didn't fight. She just stood in the aisle between me and the altar like she was waiting for something to correct itself. As they took her away, she kept repeating one thing. It was never supposed to be her. Not me, not Lily, someone else. And that was the last thing she said before she was gone. The wedding never continued. Most guests left without speaking. Evan stayed with me for a long time after. Neither of us knew what to say. Because even after she was removed, something about the situation didn't feel finished. The elderly guest was gone by the time we looked for her. No one remembered inviting her. No one knew her name. Weeks later, I tried to find records of Margaret. There were fragments, warnings, Old incident reports tied to wedding venues, but nothing fully explained her history. And Lily, there was no confirmed missing persons match that anyone could verify publicly, which made it worse, because it meant one of two things was true. Either the elderly guest was right, or Margaret had been right about something buried so deep no one could find it anymore. Sometimes I still think about that day, about how quickly a celebration turned into something else entirely, and about the way Margaret looked at the altar. Not like she was trying to ruin a wedding, but like she was trying to restore one that had already been rewritten long before I arrived. And the worst part is this: even now, I don't know if I was ever meant to be standing there at all.